In today's video, we're going to extend our boss a little bit by giving him an HP bar so that we can see the damage we're applying to him. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GDScript. Alright, so for this boss hit point bar, here's the goals. We're going to create a reusable or kind of globally accessible hit point bar that we could use for bosses. You could also use it for enemies. And we want to be able to display the name of the boss or the enemy and just make it easy to update. And we're not going to go too much further than that. So kind of those are the simple goals for this video. And I want to point out that I've brought in this boss hit point bar into my Dark Wizard sprites. And actually I want to move that because we're going to build this boss hit point bar kind of just as part of the player UI. You could build it as any other kind of auto load script or make a new scene, right? That you could use to display it. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and I'm going to use the move duplicate to functionality in Godot. This is nice. It allows you to move stuff without causing fewer issues. Sometimes if you just drag and drop things outside of Godot, it could confuse it. You got to relaunch and things like that. But especially if there's references, I mean, in this case, we haven't used this sprite sheet yet, but if we had and we use this, then it would make sure to update those. And it does a pretty good job. So I'm going to move this into my GUI folder underneath player HUD. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And there we go. You can see it moved it. It opened that folder for us. And I'm going to open up the player HUD. And this scene here is where we're going to build this UI. So make sure you grab this sprite if you need it. And you can find the link in the description of this video to the itch.io page where you can grab that. It's part of the boss zip file. And once you've got that set up, we're ready to get building. In order to build this, we're going to use a new node that we haven't used before. We're going to use a TextureProgressBar. And you could do this entire hit point bar with a progress bar. We're going to actually use a 9-patch rectangle as well, and I'll show you why. And then we're going to need a label. So let's go ahead and set up the pieces that we'll need to build this. So here in our player HUD, we've got obviously the heart container. We used it to build our game over scene as well. And so just as another child of this control, I'm going to add another control node. So add child node, and then you can just add one of these controls. And I'm going to rename it to boss. I'm going to call it boss UI. You could call it something different if you're going to use it more generically, you know. But ultimately, whatever you name it is just going to be referenced in this script here. So it's not ultra important. It's just nice to have a good name so you understand what it is. And then underneath here, let's go ahead and add a... I'm going to type in progress bar. So we've got progress bar and we've got texture progress bar. The difference obviously being that the texture one is easy to use a texture with, and that's the one we're going to use. So go ahead and add one of those. And then I'm also going to add my 9-patch-rect. And this is a nice, box that we can use to give something corners and edges and have like a tiling and repeating texture. So add one of those. And then let's add a label and we should be good to go. So all of these controls, right, you can see there in the top left of our control node here. We don't really want that, but I think, before it makes a ton of sense, all we really can do right now is just change the basic positioning. So I'm going to select the boss UI and I'm going to come here to the anchor preset and I'm just going to choose this bottom wide option so that it kind of fills the width. And I'm going to drag it a little bit taller. And I don't actually have a specific size in mind, but let's just see what I put this at. And then let's see, layout, transform. So right now the size is 48. I'm going to just make it an even 50 pixels and drag it up to, there we go. Okay, so if you want to try and replicate my settings exactly, you can do that for 480 wide, 50, 220 on the Y position so that it's at the bottom. Okay, so now everything within this is going to be centered or positioned, based on the location of this boss UI control. And just for visibility, let's go ahead and add, I'm going to just say boss name real quick for this label. And if you want to change the font that you're using here, you can. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So if we select this label and come down to, let's see, not layout, I want to come down to theme overrides, and underneath there we'll find fonts, and I'm just going to select this I guess I can't check that until I pick one. I'm going to put in quick load, and I've got a bunch of fonts in here. If you've been following along with previous videos, you should have this, or M5X by 7. That's the one I want to use for this, I think, because it's small. It's not going to take up a lot of screen real estate. And then I'm going to change the anchoring presets for this label to the center and the top. Okay, so that it's centered within its parent, just like that. And that's all we're going to do right now for the label, for the boss name. Okay, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We can make it wider if we want and center the text, but I think if we just, in fact, we can change the horizontal alignment to center. But essentially, as we update this, it's going to grow or shrink. Okay, so we don't need to do anything really special with that in this situation. But we do want to look at this texture progress bar. Now, by default, this has a left to right fill mode. There's a lot of cool options in here. If you want your progress bar to go from right to left, top, bottom, you can even have it go in a circle. You know, we've got clockwise and counterclockwise. Okay, but we're going to use left to right today, and we're going to turn on this 9-patch stretch. If you look at the tooltip, it will treat the texture the same way that this 9-patchRect would, so that it can tile instead of, you know, stretch just like a normal texture. We'll be able to set our margins and things like that. Okay, and in fact, we have stretch margins. We're just going to leave those at 0, but you could use those if you needed to. And then let's look at texture. So what's cool about this texture progress bar is we've got an under, an over, and a progress texture. So the under is like the background. The progress is the piece that grows, and then the over is like an accent that you could put on top. And in order to get the UI that we want, we could use the over, but it has some limitations that make it hard to make it really unique. And you'll see what I mean as we get going. So we're only going to use the under and the progress. So in order to use these, I'm going to go ahead and instead of dragging this boss HP on here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new atlas texture. And what an atlas texture allows us to do, and once we do this, I can go ahead and drag this texture in here to the atlas. What this allows us to do is specify the region of the texture that we want to use for this, as opposed to using the whole texture. So we can go in here and edit the region, and the piece that we want for this under, or the background, is this dark purple section. So I'm just going to go ahead, and you can drag this manually, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. Make sure you've got pixel snap on so that it snaps to that nicely. And once you've got it, you can go ahead and say close, and there we go. And you can see it define the region. So if you had known the region ahead of time, maybe you know this while you're designing your sprite sheet, you could take notes, you could just type that in. Now there's also a margin setting. We don't need a margin setting because we have nothing on the edges that we need to treat differently. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this atlas texture just like that. And now if we zoom out, you can see we've got our texture progress bars kind of starting to take shape here, right? You can see that if I resize it, it resizes that background nicely. If we resize it vertically, it's going to stretch it, but we don't want to resize it vertically, okay? And in fact, we don't want it quite wide like this, but until we get it set up, let's go ahead and leave it like that. So for the progress, I'm going to copy this atlas texture that we created, and I'm going to come down here and paste it. But we're going to make a difference. We'll come in here and we're going to change the region. Okay, so let's go edit region, and I'm just going to, whoop, I thought I could click and drag that. There we go. I think if you click it just right, you can drag it, but maybe I'm crazy. Maybe you can't. But either way, make sure you get this red box selected. Okay, we'll go ahead and say close. And then right now we're not seeing the red part of the bar, and that's because by default, you can see we've got a minimum and a maximum value here in the range, and the current value is 0. But if we set this to 50, there we go. So you can see how this progress bar is super easy to use. I mean, if I just click and drag, you can see how that updates the value in real time. You know, we could set it to 80, and obviously if it's at 100%, then it's a full bar. Okay, so I like this, how it's set up for 0 to 100. That matches what we want to do with boss health. So I'm not going to change that. And I'm going to go ahead and just leave the value at something like 80, just so I can kind of see, you know, a partially filled health bar for a minute. Now, when we look at the size of this texture progress bar, let's go ahead and finish that up just a little bit, because I don't know if you noticed, but the pixel sizes aren't matching because it is doing some scaling and stretching. So if we look at the layout and transform of this, we can see the size that we've got set. I'm going to set the Y size to 14 pixels, okay, because that actually fits what we want. The position's looking a little goofy with our font, but you can see that assuming everything was lined up, it looks like a pixel size matches. I think our label's just a little bit offset, so let me see if I can fix this. Maybe just by resizing it here and then telling this to be bottom. Well, that's close enough. You can see the pixels basically match up. I'm just going to reset the vertical alignment to top, and we should be good there. Now, if we look back at this texture, this progress bar, now that fits a little bit better. And if we were to drag it down, you know, it's going to fill the page better. I don't really want it to be quite that wide though, so I'm just going to click and drag, and by holding Alt, I can reduce the width proportionally across the X, or both sides, I should say, of the transform. Okay, and for now, I'm just going to give it a rough size, something like this. Let's go ahead and set up this NinePatchRect. And actually, I could show you what I want to do. What I want to do is we've got, if you look at the texture here, right? We've got this overlay. The problem is this overlay is larger than the progress bar pieces that we've got. So when we lay it out, we want it to go outside the bounds of the progress bar. And that's the limitation that I was running into when we look at this TextureProgressBar node, because you can't really have a texture that goes outside those bounds. At least I couldn't. I don't know, maybe we could set a negative margin, and if this works, maybe we'll try it. But yeah, see, a negative margin, it clips it. So we don't really want to do that there. So for that reason, I want this NinePatchRect in here, okay? So we're going to use this to build the overlay. Now, if you were to redesign this sprite so that this overlay piece had the same height and width and was just going to overlap the top of the HP bar, then you could just plug it in like we have with the other textures as part of your progress bar, and it would work just fine. All right, so let's address this NinePatchRect then. And what we want to do is we can just drop the texture right on here, like that. Okay, but then we need to come in and we need to define a few things. Now we could go in here and edit the region. I know the rectangle dimensions on this one are 0 and 0 on the X and Y coordinate, so we're going to start at the top. And then the width is 64 pixels and the height is 30 pixels. Okay, so that will encompass the size of this. I'm going to collapse this, and let's just look at the other settings. So we've got a patch margin. Now the patch margin is the part that doesn't repeat, and everything else inside it will repeat once we finish setting it up. So if I drag it, right now it's not working, but you'll see how this is going to come together. So let's set our left and right patch margins on here. I think they need to be about 24 pixels. Okay, so you can see how now we've got an end piece. Now we need to handle how it tiles in the middle, and that's going to be done with this axis stretch. By default it's set to stretch, but we want to do tile, and now it's going to repeat. Okay, and I've got to get these just right or else it's not going to look correct. So I think I need to maybe decrease this one to 22. Okay, and we may even want to adjust the right here. So what we can do is we need to get our boss hit point bar just over top, right, of this progress bar. And you can see how I'm just visually doing it, okay? Just like that. Make sure that the edges are just meeting up. And then same with the top and bottom. Okay, there we go. So I just kind of did that visually. And I'm going to just adjust these settings so that I get the number of repeats that I want. And actually, let me just do a rough count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't really like that. So what we can do is we can just do some basic math. Now I know that if I want to get just 10 sections of the health bar, which I do, then I need to go to my progress bar, and I'm going to adjust the width of it. So right now we have it 210 pixels wide, and I'm going to go ahead and change this to 169. Okay, and you can see the width of it now is a lot smaller. And then if I come back to my 9-patch rectangle and just drag it down, to right there. Boop. Now if we recount these, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it's a little bit funky right here. And I think if I set this setting a little bit differently, it's going to look better. There we go. Maybe let 21 for the left offset and 25 for the right. Looks like things are looking better. Now we do need to center these again. And I'm afraid it might break when I do this, but let's go ahead and try. Doink. Okay, it's centered them good, but we just need to adjust the positioning of the texture progress bar. Just drag it back down. Just like that, I think. And actually, when I look at my 9-patch rectangle on top of it, looks like I'm having an issue where it's too big, too tall. Okay, and actually we should probably set this height. Let me see, what should the height be on this one? It's 30 pixels, right, is what we set the height of this texture to. So then what we should do is go to our layout and go to transform. And I happen to get it at 30, but if not, you could just type 30 in for the height there. And then you'll know that it's pixel perfect to the size of that texture. Okay, so there we go. So we've got a texture progress bar. We've got our 9-patch rectangle over top of it. And we're kind of ready to rock and roll. I'm not quite happy though with one thing about this, because I set the value to 80%, so it should hit this line. So actually I have some positioning issues here. And let me just look at the sizes I've got set up. So the width of this is 169 pixels. I'm okay with that, I think. I'm going to take this position and I'm going to round it off to 156. Okay, I don't want any half numbers right now. And then let's kind of do the same thing with our 9-patch rectangle. Let's make sure this is positioned in a clean way. And looking at the numbers, it looks pretty good. What I think I need to do is decrease the width of it though a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to maybe make this about 100, I think about this size, so that the edges of the, if I drag this down, you can see that the edges of the hit point bar are coming into the texture just a little bit. Okay, because that's going to give us a more accurate or closer ratio on the widths, because that's what's causing that little bit of an offset there. And then I just need to go back to these settings, and I'm going to set this back to 22 from the left, which, dang, that looks pretty close. So 22 from the left and 25 from the right. Okay, so now let's select our progress bar. And if I just change this to like, not 890, to 90, that looks pretty good. Let's change it to a low value like 20 or 10. And it's lining up with those lines. So that's pretty good. Now, this little wonkiness that I'm addressing right here, obviously, if you want to follow along with me, you're going to have to get it just right. You could avoid this by changing how you do your 9-patch rectangle or planning it out a little bit better, right? I mean, this is partly due to poor planning on my part. The size of this wasn't very scientific, and so, you know, you kind of have to deal with those things sometimes. So another way to fix that, I guess, is what I'm saying, is to plan better and make a texture sprite where the spacing maybe is exactly how you want. Like maybe it's 10 pixels every line, and so then you know that your bar has to be 100 pixels wide, right? The math is easy when you do that. I chose something kind of bizarre, and because of these little ding dongs on the end and all this stuff, it just throws that off a little bit. Okay, but there we go. We've got an HP bar and we've got a label. I'm just going to drag this down closer to the bottom maybe, so that it's not intruding on the game too much. And I'll do the same with the label. Just drag it down and we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save the project, and just so we can see it in action, if I run this boss scene right now, then I should see that bar on the bottom. There we go. Okay. It doesn't work, of course, yet, but it will work. All right. So let's hook up this health bar. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to open our player HUD script. Now, if you haven't been following along, you can just make a scene that is a preload scene like this. At this point, it would be best to look at the player HUD video if you're kind of curious how we set this up. But I'm going to go ahead and open this, and we've got a script here, right, for our player HUD. And what we need to do is we only need a couple functions. We need the ability to show and hide that hit point bar. We want to update the name, and then we want to update the health bar itself. Okay, that's basically all we need to do with this. I guess in order to do that, we need to get a reference to each of these pieces. So I'm just going to select the boss UI, the texture progress bar, and the label. And I'm just going to drag them in and hold control and then let go. And there we go. We've got a reference to each of those. Okay. So now we have a reference to the boss UI, so we can hide and show that. The texture progress bar, so we can update the value. And then we have the label, so we can update the name. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and actually change the name of these. I'm going to change this to boss underscore label. And I'm going to change this texture progress bar. I'm going to call it boss underscore HP bar, like that. And then boss UI, I think, is fine for that one. Okay. You would think that the first thing we want to do is in the on ready, we want to hide the boss health. And if you're thinking that, you'd be right, but I want to create a function for that. So we're going to create a function that we can just call, and it'll be called hide boss health. Okay. So that way, when we're running the game, the boss health isn't there until we encounter a boss. And obviously we've got an issue because that function doesn't exist. So I'm going to just scroll to the bottom of my file, and we'll make a new function called hide boss health. And that can return void, doesn't need to return a value. And this is really simple, but I want it to be a function like this so that we can make it easy to reuse elsewhere as we need to, but also so that if you want to do things like add an animation or a sound effect or anything else to this, you can. So for the hide boss health, all we're going to do is set the visibility of the boss UI to false. So we'll say boss UI visible equals false. Okay. And so just with that change, if we run the project here, if I run this boss, you can see there's no boss UI. And in fact, maybe just as an example, let me open another scene, room 3 maybe. I'll just go ahead and run this scene. So there's no boss UI visible here, okay? So that's good, that's what we want. Now, obviously, if we can hide the boss UI, we need to be able to show it as well. So let's create a function for that, and I'll make it above my hide. So function boss, how about show boss health? I don't like how there's no space there on that one down there in the hide. Okay, so we have a new function to show it. And obviously we need to do the opposite of hiding it, right? Make the boss UI visible. So boss UI dot visible equals true. Okay, now we also, when we show it though, we need to do a little bit more than that because we've got the boss name. We want to update that. So I'm going to go ahead. This function then is going to need to accept that as an argument. Otherwise, we don't know what to update it to. So when we call show boss health, we're going to have to provide the name of the boss, or it could be an enemy. But I'll just call this boss name. It's a string that we need to pass in, right? So then all we have to do down here is just grab our boss label and set the text. So .text equals, and then we can say boss name. Pretty easy. And then we do need to make sure that the hit point bar is full. Okay. Now this UI is not going to track the health of the boss. It's only going to be used to display the health of the boss. And so, you know, if we go back to our dark wizard, we've got this script actually already open for me. But if you were to open that, right, this dark wizard boss script is what tracks the hit points. He's got maximum and current hit points, right? And they update here. So when they change in this script, all we're going to be doing is sending a signal to the UI that we need to update the value, okay? So let's go ahead and go back to our player HUD and let's create a function that we can use to update the value of the boss health. So we'll say func update boss health, okay? Now, obviously, and there, we need an H on health. That's pretty obvious, but also obviously I think we need to provide the values here because we don't know them. So this script is going to be designed to not care what the boss health is or how it works. It doesn't care what the minimum maximum is. It just wants us to tell the function what it is. Okay, so this is going to require an HP value and a max HP value. And these are, I'm casting these both as integers because that's how I've built the health in my game. If you're using floats, that's perfectly fine. In fact, we're going to have to convert these to floats here, because in order to do the division and have it look nice and have fractions, we just need a float, right? We need decimal places, and integers do not have decimals. But all we're going to do is within this is just take our boss HP bar and set the value equal to, the HP divided by the max HP, okay? But because these are integers, we're going to have to do it in a special way. And I also want to clamp them. We want to make sure that it's between 0 and 100 because those are the values that our bar will accept, right? So we'll say clamp F, and this clamp F function just does what I just described, okay? So what the clamp wants us to provide is a value first. And so that value, what we said is it's HP divided by max HP, right? But because these are integers, it's not going to let us do that. So we need to convert each of these to a float. So if you just say float HP and float max HP, now we can do this, perform this calculation. And then obviously if we divide those, it gives us a percentage, but a percentage from 0 to 1, 1 being 100%, 0 being 0%. So, if he's at half health, the number we're going to get from that is 0.5. So we want to multiply it by 100. That way we get a value between 0 and 100, okay? And then we're still getting a warning here because we have too few arguments because the clamp F requires the value as well as a minimum and a maximum value. So the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 100. Easy peasy. So there we go. We've got a function now where we can update the boss health. And what we'll do is we mentioned up here in our show boss health that we want to initialize the health at a full value. So we'll just simply call update boss health, and we don't have to pass in anything real. We can just pass in 1 and 1 because that's 100%. Okay. I'm going to save this. Now I'm on scene 3 here where I've got my slimes. Okay. So just to illustrate this, now if I run this scene, it's not going to show the health. Okay. So that still works. But we want it to show when we run the boss, right? So how do we do that? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over to, let's go back to our scripts. I have my Dark Wizard boss. If you don't have that handy, you can find your scene with it, Dark Wizard boss, and click on the script. Okay. Now in here, we don't need to add any reference or anything special to be able to do this because if you recall this player HUD, and let me review this real quick in my project settings. So if you go to globals, if you're in 4.3, if you're in Godot for previous versions, then it's just going to be auto load, I think. So underneath globals, though, we've got our auto loads, player HUD, right? So this player HUD is an auto load scene. And so this script is globally available with the name player HUD, just like that. Okay, so from within my Dark Wizard boss script, right after we've set the hit points, I can go ahead and just say player HUD, right? And then we can just call that new, but one of the new functions we've got, the one we want to call here is show boss health. And then obviously this wants us to provide a name for the boss. Okay, so we can say Dark Wizard or whatever his name is. Maybe his name is, Jim. So whereas we weren't showing the health on this scene, right, with the slimes, when we go to the boss scene and run this, because this has got the script on it, it's going to show the boss health. There we go. And it says Dark Wizard. Okay. Boss health still isn't hooked up though. So let's go ahead and take care of that. That's going to be pretty straightforward. We'll just go back to our script here. In our Dark Wizard script, if we find the damage taken or take damage, damage taken is what we've got it called here. We actually had made a comment in the previous video that we want to update the boss health bar. Well, let's go ahead and do that right there. Okay. So here we'll just call player HUD. And then we say dot update boss health, right? That's the function. And then all we have to do is pass in the HP of our boss. Now, even though our boss doesn't have 100 hit points, he only has 10. The script will work just fine, right? Because we've set it up to support that. So we just pass in the hit points and the max hit points of our boss. And voila. So now it should work. I'm going to go ahead and run the boss fight. It'll work with one exception. Okay, so there we go. We can see, every time I hit the boss, I'm going to go ahead and charge up an attack. I think this will do 2 bars of damage from him. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Now, when I beat the boss, though, I should decrease his health for this because I might die trying to beat him. I did. Well, I'm just going to spoil it for you. When we beat the boss, the health bar is not going to disappear. Okay, it's just going to stay on screen. So that's the last thing we need to do to wrap this up. And we'll just do that. You could do it two ways. If the hit points reaches 0 from the UI, we could hide it. That's problematic because maybe you don't want that to happen. I don't know. Maybe it's not problematic. If it works for your game, it works. Okay. But for me, I want the boss to just handle that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, in our Dark Wizard script, I'm going to go to the defeat function. Okay. And I'm simply just going to come in here and add a new line and call player HUD dot. I spelled that wrong. Very wrong. Player HUD dot. And then what we want to do is, I'm having a hard time. I don't know, is my shift key stuck or what, but I'm not getting a capital P. There we go. Player HUD dot, for the third time. And then we'll say hide boss UI or boss health. Okay. Now, so that I can test this and feel good about it, because clearly I suck at the boss fight, I'm going to just give him, I'll give him 2 health. I'll make it a little bit hard. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. So what should happen is once we defeat the boss, hit point bar should go away. Okay. Oh man, did I not save that? Did I not save this change? Okay, here we go. Nice. Half health already. Just hit him with a boomerang. So you can see once I defeated him, player health or the boss health bar disappeared. And there we go. Okay. So we've got a fully functioning, obviously I'm glitching the game. I never opened the door to get in there in the first place, but ignore that. I mean, if I had opened it, everything was set up for that to work, but we've got a functioning boss hit point bar. I'm going to go ahead and reset this. Now you could use this health bar or this concept and apply it to any enemy in the game. You know, if you wanted all enemies to be able to use this health bar, you totally could. I wouldn't want to, because this one's big and nasty looking for the boss. And, you know, maybe you want to have a different version of a health bar that looks similar, but is a little bit more simple, that you use for the slimes and the skeletons and whatever else it is that you're fighting. Okay, but you should have all the tools here to make that work. And then you just go through and update maybe your enemy scripts to be able to call this global and update and things like that. Okay. In that situation where you put it on all enemies, you probably also want to put a timer on it where if it hasn't been updated for a certain number of seconds, it disappears and things like that. Those are all exercises I will leave to you to do. If that's hard to figure out and you guys have questions though about how to do certain things with this boss hit point bar, or maybe you want to add a functionality that you can't figure out, go ahead and drop that in the comments and I'll add it to my list of things for consideration in the future. And otherwise, thanks for following along. And as always, I do appreciate everybody and the support you give me. So if you enjoyed the video, if it helped you out, give me a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, so that you can see what's coming next. And otherwise, we'll see you next time.